What's up, guys? Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to talk about the beatdown that Megyn Kelly gave to Jake Tapper. Jake, as you know, is the corrupt CNN reporter who covered up Joe Biden's mental decline for years, and now he wrote a book and is trying to profit from it. Megyn Kelly absolutely destroyed him. Let's go to some of the highlights.
I did ask Joe Biden to be transparent about his health records in an interview in 2020. I did ask him about the fact that voters
but then he wasn't.
Thought that he was not transparent at all. No.
He promised you that he would be transparent about his health records, and then he wasn't. And when you sat with him again,
at all.
including 1 month after the Jackie Worski thing, you didn't ask him about it. You didn't follow up on the fact that he was falling up the stairs, that he was losing his train of thought regularly, that he was slurring, that he was incomprehensible, that he was getting lost on the White House lawn. You sat right across from him and you asked none of that, notwithstanding the fact that he had promised you he would be fully transparent about his health issues.
That's true, but I did ask him about his age and the fact that the American people had concluded that even though he said whenever anybody brought up the subject of his age, watch me. And I said,
yes,
they're watching you and they are concerned that you were too old for this job.
But you know as well as I do that there's a way of, you can say, hey, there's this poll on your age, or you could say, you just forgot that Jackie Worski was dead. You asked where she was moments after watching a videotape tribute to her. You lowered the flags at the White House after she died. This happened 13 days before you sat with him. There is a way of pressing a man like that on the actual infirmities to bring it home to him and to the audience, and you didn't do it.
All right, let me set this up for you. Megyn is talking about Jackie Worski. She was a congresswoman who died in a car crash. Joe and Jill offered their condolences and put out the following statement. Jill and I are shocked and saddened by the death of Congresswoman Jackie Worski of Indiana. We send our deepest condolences to her husband, Dean, to the family of her staff members, and to the people in her district. That was in August. In September, the following month, Joe is speaking at an event at the White House that Jackie helped organize, and he asks if she's in attendance. Take a look.
And I want to thank all of you here for including bipartisan elected officials like Representative Governor, Senator Braun, Senator Booker, Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here.
Joe forgot she was killed just a month earlier. And as Megyn points out, this is after they just watched the video honoring her at that event. They talked about how tragic it was and how she unfortunately died in a car accident. Joe then gets up on stage and asks if she's in the audience. When Karine was asked about why Joe did this, listen to her bullshit response.
What I had said is that she was on top of mind and that he is going to see her family in just 2 days' time on Friday to honor her work, to honor her legacy, if you will.
Joe's going to visit the family on Friday to honor her, but he forgets that she's dead. This makes it even worse. You're going to see the family in 2 days to honor her life, but you're asking where she is. By the way, Jake Tapper never brought this up, even though he interviewed Joe 13 days after he made those comments. Let's go back to Megyn Kelly.
I've said I look back at my coverage with humility, and I wish I did cover the issues of age and acuity, but I wish I had covered them much more. And I wish, I mean, of course, it's May 2025. Do I wish that in that 10, 15-minute interview I had with Biden in October 2022, that this had been the only subject because I had then
well, it wasn't
what I know
just that,
now?
though, Jake. It wasn't just that. I mean, you sat with him a couple of times in the course of his presidency, and these issues were not pressed. Well, there was at least that time, and then there was the time at the beginning. And but separate and apart from that, you covered the Biden's presidency. No. Let me just finish my point. You covered the Biden presidency.
With him during his I had one interview with him
and it was
during
13 days after the Jackie Worski thing. But you covered the Biden presidency aggressively throughout the 4 years, and you didn't cover mental acuity hardly at all. I mean, time and time again, when issues came up, you seemed to be running cover for the president.
I don't think
interested.
That's true.
Well, I mean, we'll start with the Laura Trump issue that you referred. Here it is.
Watch how nasty he is to her.
I want to ask you a couple things about things that you've done on the campaign trail. Joe Biden, as we all know, has worked to overcome a stutter. And one of the speakers at the Democratic convention was a young boy who the vice president inspired, named Braden Harrington. Take a listen.
It was really amazing to hear that someone like me became vice president.
Braden Harrington, a very brave young boy. You made this comment earlier in the campaign about Joe Biden. Let's take a listen to that.
Every time he comes on stage or they turn to him, I'm like, Joe, can you get it out? Let's get the words out, Joe. You kind of feel bad for him.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You have
to
no
watch somebody on stage
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. I would think that somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses diagnosing politicians from afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say.
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked
is
about
that
a cognitive decline.
That Joe Biden
I have one last
struggling
question for you, Laura. You can't
times on stage, and it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world.
Okay,
that is all I'm saying. I genuinely feel sorry for Joe Biden.
I appreciate it. I'm sure it was from a place of concern. We all believe that. Laura Trump, thank you so much.
He was a total dick. He knew that she wasn't mocking his stutter. In fact, Jake was exploiting this kid to try to form some stupid connection to Biden. Nobody even knew that Joe Biden had a stutter. To blame his cognitive decline on a stutter is laughable. Joe was talking to dead people and needed cue cards to tell him where to sit.
It's President Biden's cheat sheet. He literally tipped his hand, showing a card with step-by-step instructions. You enter the Roosevelt room and say hello. You take your seat. You give brief comments. You thank participants. You depart. The detailed instructions were written for Biden for a meeting with wind industry executives. He accidentally exposed it when he flipped it over to look at notes on the back of the card.
Our president had to be told that he needed to enter a room and say hello. Actually, they had to put it in writing. If they would have just told him, Joe, go inside, say hello, and take a seat, he would have said, nope, too much. I can't remember all that. Write it down for me. And then he had to hold it face up to look at it to remind him what to do. That's not a stutter. Jake?
Do you want to apologize to Laura Trump now?
I've already apologized to her. I called her months ago.
And what did she say?
I mean, I don't want to disclose the contents of a private conversation, but I thought the conversation went well. And she has said this publicly, so I feel fine sharing it. She said that she would never mock anybody's stutter. But I mean, after we did the research for this book, and I realized how bad his acuity issues were, I called Laura Trump and I said, you were right.
She was totally right. That's the thing, because when I watched that clip, and I'm giving voice to what a lot of people watching the show are feeling, Jake, I feel angry because she was right. And not only did you not allow her to make her comments, but you seemed to try to humiliate her. You had a hostility toward the position, but she was totally right. And then you lectured her on how she was in no position to diagnose cognitive decline, which you guys do at length, including on page 4 of your book. You describe at length his cognitive decline, which is all she tried to do with you. But you had such a visceral reaction to her. And my feeling is that's because you didn't want to hear it.
Joe Biden has been saying stupid things for decades. Okay,
I get what you're saying, but this minimizes it too, because it was more than saying stupid things. But I'm telling you, like over here in my ecosphere, we were covering all of these. It wasn't just falling down; it was getting lost. It was some of the stuff you report in your book. We knew, and we were reporting on, like the multi-jump cuts in the videos of him, where it was obvious he couldn't get through a 1-minute take. So they had to use those. It was clear to us that he was using teleprompter, and there was some reporting on that at the time, all of which the White House was denying.
Here's what Megyn's talking about. You're going to see 5 jump cuts because Joe couldn't get through a 13-second campaign ad. Watch this.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. Since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
That's a 13-second ad that Joe needed split up into 6 different parts. 5 jump cuts, so 6 parts, because Joe couldn't speak for 13 seconds straight. By the way, Jake interviewed him after this, didn't mention it. Let's go back to the beatdown.
Now, with the current White House, I have some connections. With the Joe Biden White House, I had none, but you did. You did. And so while you've been in Washington 30 years, Jake, you guys, you and CNN have White House connections, but there was no effort, none to get to the bottom of this. And now for you guys to write this book like there was a cover up, it's like there was a cover up and there was an attempted cover up. It could only ever work if you allowed it, if the press allowed it. Some of us tried not to, and some of us were complicit.
Let's just stick to the facts here, okay? When there is a damaging report...
That's what I've been doing all along.
I'm talking about what you just said.
Didn't miss the biggest story of the century when it comes to presidential politics, and one of us did. You are not the right messenger to bring the story about the cover-up because you helped. You allowed it, and you likely did that out of a desire to help Joe Biden and hurt Donald Trump. You didn't want to do anything that might improve Trump's chances. But those of us on this side of the aisle had been reporting in depth on his multiple problems and the obvious lies we were being told for years. For years. You really want the audience to believe you were fooled?
That's the worst part about this, that they think we're idiots. Jake honestly expects you to believe that he had no idea that Joe was losing it, even though he has numerous sources in the White House, even though he interviewed him several times, and even though he could see what we saw on TV. Jake wants you to think he was completely fooled. This is why I hate CNN. I hate all of the corrupt left-wing media. And this is why nobody watches them anymore.
But your commentary on your show, Jake, consistently ran in one direction. Occasionally, you would ask some tough questions.
That's true.
I mean, here you are in September 2023 saying that Biden was sharp mentally. September of 2023.
No, hold on.
You said he's sharp mentally. I think the question is physically, right? He's sharp mentally. And then you pointed out that his opponent, Donald Trump, was only a couple of years younger than he was. There are many examples where you're doing that kind of coverage.
Okay, so let's be honest and full about what you're talking about.
There's no problem with honesty on this show.
Okay.
Yeah, let's watch it. Let's watch it. Yeah, Frank Fork came on with a biography about Joe Biden.
Frank Fork came on to talk about his biography with Joe Biden, and I'm trying to summarize what his conclusions were.
No, he wasn't. That wasn't Frank Fork's opinion. That was your opinion, Jake. This is the interview Megyn Kelly's talking about.
You know, the question about aging, I've spent so much time talking to people this last week about aging, and everybody brings all of this personal experience to bear because we have parents and we have grandparents, and aging is not a singular experience. Everybody
it's different for everyone.
Everybody ages, and there's not a sell-by date for human beings where they pass the point where they're no longer up to the job. I think Nikki Haley has talked about a mental acuity test for presidential candidates, and everything I've seen about Joe Biden, he would pass that test.
Right. He's sharp physically. I mean, mentally. Yeah. I think the question is physically, right?
The guy says Joe would pass any cognitive test, and Jake says, right, because he's sharp mentally. You said it, Jake. But just like every other Democrat, you're going to try and rewrite history. Now let's go back to that interview and listen to what Jake says about Trump at the end.
Right. Well, and then how do we ask that question? So everybody slows down as they age, and he maybe doesn't have the stamina to do the type of public appearances he would have done when he was 70 or 60. But does that mean that he doesn't have the stamina to do the job? I mean, I don't think there's like a simple answer to these questions, and it's all very subjective at the end of the day.
Right. And the guy who's his chief opponent is only 3 or 4 years younger than him anyway.
And of course, Jake has to remind us that Trump is just 3 or 4 years younger than Biden. Megyn is right. Jake did everything he could to help Joe and to hurt Trump. But what he's saying today to Megyn Kelly is a complete lie. Jake was not summarizing the author's conclusion. Let's watch it again back to back.
And I'm trying to summarize what his conclusions were. He's sharp physically. I mean, mentally.
Yeah.
I think the question is physically, right?
Jake was not summarizing Frank's conclusion. He was voluntarily giving his opinion. In fact, he interrupted his guest to make that point, that Joe was sharp mentally. So for those who want to cut Jake some slack and say, well, maybe today he's being honest, keep in mind that he's still lying.
So he is saying that Biden
and where is the part where you say he's not sharp mentally, Frank? We've seen the following 10 examples in the past year, never mind 3 years. When we got to leading up to the debate, which you anchored, that June 27th debate, 2024, there was a ton of news leading into that debate in that month. And we looked back at your coverage and found that you ignored it. Not only did you ignore the Jackie Walorski moment when you had him 13 days later, but you ignored the freeze up that he had at the Juneteenth celebration. You ignored what happened at the G7 when he wandered off and Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, had to go find him. You ignored the freeze up at the George Clooney LA fundraiser. You didn't cover it. You only covered it after the debate, after George Clooney wrote his op-ed. Jake, nobody made you do that. There was your network at every turn was telling us those were, quote, cheap fakes. And you were not combating that narrative. CNN was actively misleading us on what our very eyes were showing us. That's the truth. That's the record.
She's right. Again, when videos of Joe's mental decline surfaced, CNN, Jake Tapper's network, covered for Joe by claiming they were cheap fakes. Here's Brian Stelter.
White House press secretary used the phrase cheap fakes, the idea of cheap fakes. Let me explain what that is to people. We've been worried for years about AI deep fakes, that computer-generated images are going to trick people into believing something that's totally false. Cheap fakes are a little bit simpler. They're cheap. They're just distorted, out-of-context videos, chopped up in certain ways, constructed in certain ways. That's what we're seeing. That's what the Biden administration, the Biden campaign is so worried about right now. But make no mistake, they are worried about this. This is a real problem. This is not some made-up fiction. The videos are oftentimes made up, but the problem is real. Because some of us, Abby, watch a 40-minute speech by Biden. We see the full context. Other people only watch a 5-second clip. And that's going to be something that's going to, I suspect, follow Biden for the rest of this campaign.
That narrative was all over fake news, but I limited that clip to just CNN, Jake Tapper's network. And as Megyn says, Jake did not push back. Now listen to him acknowledge that he was wrong.
I will acknowledge that after I was named co-moderator of the debate, I tried to make sure that my coverage was fairly vanilla, both about Trump and about Biden, because I just wanted to get to the debate. And, the Biden people and the Trump people, I'm kind of frankly surprised that either one of them agreed to have me as a moderator because both sides disliked me so much. But yeah, I remember that moment. And I remember that moment, the glitch at the immigration event, and not getting much attention outside of conservative media at all. And Alex and I are here to say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct. And that there should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with, all of us, for how this was covered or not covered sufficiently. 100%. So, I mean, I'm not here to defend coverage that I've already acknowledged I wish I could do differently.
It's good to hear that, but I think he's just trying to sell his book. Because as we already pointed out, he's still lying. So this apology means nothing to me. Jake knows he has to apologize. If he doesn't apologize, nobody would buy his book. So to me, this isn't sincere. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's all I got for you on this one. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying to the end. And I hope to see you on the next video.